In our top stories tonight, Barbados reopening to be determined by when it establishes protocols to ensure the safety of locals and visitors. The Department of Emergency Management includes COVID-19 measures in its Atlantic hurricane season plans. And in sports, with qualifiers cancelled, Barbados advanced to the 2020 Youth Netball World Cup in Fiji.
Broadcasting from our studios in the Pine St. Michael, this is CBC Newsnight, starting now.
Good evening, I'm Lisa Broom. In our top story tonight, the reopening of Barbados' vital tourism sector will be driven by the country having a set of protocols to ensure the safety of locals and visitors. That was the response from Prime Minister Mia Motley during a BBC interview today to a question about when the country would be reopened. The interviewer was Matthew Amrolwala. Lisa Lord reports.
During her 8-minute interview, Prime Minister Motley says the position taken by Barbados to ensure its nationals and guests stay safe before reopening has also been adopted by several others in CARICOM. She says governments are trying to balance lives and livelihoods. She also reveals that deep discussions are being held on a common public health protocol within the region, and talks are ongoing with the airlines and cruise industries.
We all hope weeks, but we need to make sure that we touch all the bases. And to that extent, I think the airlines have been doing a reasonably good job in trying to ensure that the planes can be kept sanitized, certainly far more than they have been. But the big issue is testing. And testing before people get on the planes, or testing when people arrive. Quite frankly, it's more practical before people leave, and we need access to rapid tests or test protocols that will allow us to be able to determine what is the risk that we are going to take if a person is tested 24 hours before, or should the person be tested within a matter of hours before going to check in.
In acknowledging that most countries across the region are tourism dependent and therefore particularly vulnerable, the CARICOM chair describes the scale of unemployment as crippling. She says between 40 to 60% of government revenue was affected in April alone.
Up to this morning, I received a letter from the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association as chair of CARICOM, and the individual countries are going to make sure that we touch all the bases, because it is not our intention to import, it is not our intention to have anyone be affected. But at the same time, we have to balance the reality that the Caribbean is among the most travel, if not the most travel and trade dependent region in the world, with 50% of our GDP effectively coming from it.
Ms. Motley was asked about the temptation to offer popular, easy solutions, and this was her response.
You have to govern for tomorrow, because tomorrow is coming. And if you only govern for today, then you will undermine the very ground on which you stand for tomorrow. So look, we have to be sensible enough to know that we're in this for the long haul. The statement that I've told my people all the time is to stay focused. And once we stay focused on the mission, then it becomes that much easier to overcome it. We believe that we can have a meaningful life after COVID, but we have to protect what we do during it.
Regarding the role of female leadership at a time like this, the Prime Minister says the ability to care and ensure people are not put at risk is important. Lisa Lord, CBC News.
Thanks, Lisa. And we're also hearing tonight that Barbados has entered a third straight day with no new COVID-19 cases. The Best dos Santos Public Health Laboratory reported no positive cases of COVID-19 after performing 100 tests yesterday. No one was released from isolation today. Therefore, the numbers remain the same. 92 confirmed cases, 71 recoveries, with 14 people in isolation and 7 deaths. The Public Health Lab has now completed 4,888 tests. Well, COVID-19 measures will be included in the Department of Emergency Management's plans for this year's Atlantic hurricane season. The 2020 Atlantic hurricane season officially starts in 5 days on June 1st. And the department's acting deputy director, Danielle Skeet, says they're looking at the accommodation arrangements at the respective hurricane shelters. She was a guest on Morning Barbados.
the COVID-19 environment that we're in now, we're currently revisiting the shelters to discuss the capacity now, taking into consideration physical distancing, etc. So there are going to be some minor changes in some of those shelters in terms of the capacity and what people would normally see as the norm. So of course, we're going to be doing things like screening temperatures when you upon entry. Persons will know, along with having to bring their 3 days supply of food, etc. with them, you're also now going to be asked to walk with your mask, which is something that is different, something that we would not have done before.
And as the season's start date approaches, Mesquite has advised Barbadians to prepare by stocking up and rolling out the respective emergency plans for their households.
We know that everyone is not going to be comfortable going to a public shelter. And therefore, we're asking people to take the time now to ensure that your house is prepared. If there are any repairs that need to be done to your roof, if there's any debris outside that needs to be removed, because we understand that during high winds, etc., things that seem so simple, a child's ball or toy becomes a very dangerous missile.
Barbados Prime Minister Mia Motley is at this moment meeting with the social partnership at the Lloyd Erskine Sandiford Centre. The meeting got underway around 3 this afternoon, and one of the main issues being discussed by the private sector and trade union movement and government is that of the proposed forced savings, or national meeting turn, as it is being called, and CBC will bring you new developments as they come to hand. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic has dramatically changed everyday life for millions of people across the globe, from the way we interact with each other to how we conduct our business. In tonight's edition of Coping with COVID-19, Shane Jones looks at some financial do's and don'ts during this time.
With so many businesses being disrupted during this time, finances, whether personal or big business, are under the microscope. Here are some ways to help you manage your finances in this COVID-19 environment. Utilize the social safety net and concessions that are available. These include national insurance, the government's VAT loans if you're a business owner, and the moratoriums banks are offering. There is also welfare and charities. Be sure to make use of whatever is available to you. There is no shame in it. The entire world is facing this crisis. Entrepreneurs, start to make moves. Small business is nimble, flexible, and responsive to demand, and in many spaces, it's known as humanity's best response to an economic crisis. If you found yourself out of work, think of what people want right now and how it aligns with what you can do. It's the fastest way to getting yourself going again. Look for projects that can be easily started given your skills and experience. Once you get it off the ground, make sure you register your business and look for advice to help grow it. There are lots of online platforms where you can sell your services. Platforms like Amazon's Mechanical Turk and Upwork allow you to sell professional services in areas that you might be well trained in. You might have an idea that isn't going to cut it in Barbados, but think outside of the box. Maybe you can sell it outside of Barbados. COVID-19 means millions across the globe are stuck inside behind their computers. That gives you a captive market, and with the internet, you can practically sell anything, anywhere. If you're not sure that you have the skills to take advantage of the crisis, learn something new. The University of the West Indies has professional training courses, but there are also loads of open courses for free online. Be proactive and reach out to your friends and contacts in your search for opportunities or even businesses if you think you can add value to their operations. There are lots of people who need your help at this time who don't realize it. These are some tips to help you cope with COVID-19.
A number of Barbados teachers are now equipped with the basic knowledge to teach coding when the new school term starts. This as they proudly display their work in a G Suite showcase at the end of their Starting from Scratch online workshop. The coding workshop began at the beginning of May with 47 participants across all secondary schools and 2 special schools, and was facilitated by Dr. Ramona Archer Bradshaw and Catherine Gibson. The teachers had no knowledge of coding and were taught the rudiments of the program over 8 sessions. The facilitators say the teachers surpassed learning outcomes identified. During the online showcase, Minister of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, Santia Bradshaw, said the workshop is part of what government wants to see as it relates to a reformation in education.
All that you have taken on board in the last few weeks will be of value to you and certainly to all of our students. And I look forward to certainly seeing the benefits from this particular program being manifested amongst all of our students across the educational system.
Ms. Bradshaw says her ministry has been in constant discussions to formulate the best way to use technology to take the education system forward.
There are a lot of ideas as it relates to technology. This is really just one part of a bigger puzzle in terms of being able to introduce our young people to different aspects of computers and technology, and to have a better understanding of the opportunities that are out there for them as well. And it really pleases me to know that all of you have come on board, are taking the time out to be able to improve what you already know or learn new things as it relates to this program, because I know that the students certainly are excited about what is to come. They're excited about the opportunities certainly that will be presented from this.
A university lecturer is calling for a return of the subsistence economy as a way to overcome some of the hardships caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. We hear more in this Sherwood McCaskey story.
Dr. Henderson Carter, who heads the history department at the Cave Hill campus, made a suggestion while preparing for an episode of CBC's weekly program, Mind Community.
In the 1930s and 40s, and even in the 1950s, 60s, Barbados had a thriving subsistence economy where people would have done backyard farming, they would have grown their produce, they would have reared stock, and that helped not only to feed themselves, but to feed others in the community as well.
Dr. Carter suggests ways in which we could all sustain this type of economy.
First of all, we have to transform some of our beautiful lawns into productive gardens once again. Secondly, we have to produce small things. I'm not asking anybody to produce yams and potatoes, but what about producing little beans, some carrots, some thyme, things that we could easily go out into the backyard and put into the pot?
As to the way forward with the subsistence economy, how could we all play our part?
I know the government has been giving food hampers, but what about also giving seedlings? What about also giving some cans so that we can put some mold in the cans, fertilize the cans, and grow your thyme, grow your seasoning, grow your beans in these little cans, and feed yourself and make sure that you do well in this COVID economy.
Sherwood McCaskey, CBC News.
Thanks, Sherwood. Well, yesterday's Africa Day celebrations in Barbados had a special twist. The occasion was used to pay tribute to one of the island's revered literary icons, the late Professor Kamal Brathwaite. It came in the form of a short video feature, which was released by the National Cultural Foundation. Professor Pedro Welch, Nala, and Richard Salif Smith are featured in the production. Reflecting on Brathwaite's work, Professor Welch noted the pieces linked Barbados and what people thought to be its lost African heritage.
He also noted that in Trinidad you might find remnants of African religion. In Cuba you might find throughout the Caribbean Santeria. You might find voodoo. You might find that Shango. but this was absent. So he wondered what had happened in Barbados. And so in the poem, there's an attempt to look into the recesses of Barbadian activity and look to see what Barbadians were doing that might in fact speak to that African heritage. And he found some of it too in strange places, in the church, and sometimes among the spiritual battles and others.
Well, still to come, Guyanese assured of a brighter future as they celebrate their Independence Day. But before we get to that, here is a tip from Cooperators General Insurance.
This tip of the day is brought to you by Cooperators General Insurance Company Limited. Insurance the way you want it to be.
Watch out for cyber bullies. Anyone who uses technology to pick on you, harass or threaten you is a cyber bully. Report it to an adult immediately. Cyberbullying is a crime in Barbados. This tip is brought to you in association with the Child Care Board and UNICEF, helping to protect our children while they surf the web.
As Guyana marks 54 years as an independent nation, President David Granger has highlighted the strides made by the CARICOM state and the expectations of an expanding economy over the next decade. In his Independence Day message, he gave Guyanese the assurance that they can look forward to greater equality and a higher quality of life.
Have become a petroleum state in which the proceeds from the petroleum industry will contribute to transforming the economy. We are on a path towards becoming a green state, which will promote the preservation and protection of our environment and the adoption of renewable energy technologies. We have launched the digital state by extending the use of information and communication technology to ensure connectivity in every region. We are on a path towards becoming an education nation, aiming at universal primary and secondary schooling and free education at the University of Guyana. Guyanese, I urge you to observe the 54th anniversary of independence in a restrained manner. The emergency measures imposed in response to the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic have not permitted public celebrations. I urge you also to await the declaration of the results of the general and regional elections, which were held on 2nd of March. The Elections Commission, which is the sole authority charged with administering the elections in accordance with our Constitution, has responded in an orderly and lawful manner to the challenges which have arisen.
As Jamaica works to flatten the COVID-19 curve, a university student has designed a device which could potentially make a significant impact in these efforts. We have more in this TVJ report.
Javier Bryan is a second-year electronics and computer science student at the University of the West Indies. He enjoys programming and building electronic components for projects. It's a passion which he says runs deep from a tender age.
All of my friends, really, if they have any computer issue, something that needs to be fixed, replaced, repaired, I'm the person they usually come to.
And so when he was asked to build a patient monitoring system for a class project, doing so came natural. Initially, the idea was to design a device to monitor the heartbeat and body temperature of a bedridden patient who was unable to visit the doctor. But with COVID-19, Javier realized his invention had more than one purpose.
A doctor could monitor his or her patient remotely from anywhere, given that hospitals are running out of spaces. Most people have to be in their home self-quarantine. So it would be good to have something that can monitor the patients at the same time while not physically being where doctors are.
He explains how it works.
There are some sensors that would measure some information from a person in quarantine, and it would send this information via a Wi-Fi chip over the internet to a website so that the doctor can see it.
The device is still a prototype, but Javier believes it could be a game changer in the health industry, especially during this pandemic.
Antigua and Barbuda is still making plans to host Festa in 2021. We hear more in this ABS television report.
Deputy Director of Festa, Michael Freeland, says Antigua and Barbuda continues to make headway as planning for the 2021 festival continues despite the COVID-19 outbreak. Freeland was able to give me an update today, saying there's no major challenges except for one area.
With COVID, it only has delayed, I guess, financial arrangements in terms of us putting out products as soon as we anticipated. But other than that, it has not derailed anything from where Festa sits.
Freeland says due to the world pandemic, it's too early to know if other countries intend to not participate.
We do not anticipate countries reaching out to us no sooner to indicate as to their contingency or they have any difficulties or so forth. So that gives us a little bit of time in which to continue our planning, and also gives us time to gauge as to the response of hosting Festa.
Freeland says they're, however, planning with COVID-19 in mind, and they're flexible to necessary adjustments, if any. He says CARICOM held a meeting last week with over 120 stakeholders.
Speaking about how COVID has impacted culture and how it will impact festivals going forward, fetting events, these kind of things. And amazingly, everyone has turned to be online in the short term. And for us, really and truly, we can't predict what will happen next year. What will have to happen is we have to be mindful that we have a Ministry of Health that will execute the protocols that we need to adhere to.
Freeland says CARICOM is also keeping in contact with regional health agencies to ensure a safe festival.